Hello and welcome to Addicted to Lacrosse. This is episode 1.2. Today is January the 13th, 2014. My name is Graeme Perro. With me today is Tyler Fitch, as usual. Unfortunately, Melissa Daphne, who's normally with us as well, is away on not on vacation. She's away on business. She's in Las Vegas, so I imagine there's probably some vacation happening there as well. But she was not able to get her schedule to sync with ours, so she won't be able to join us tonight. So, yes, we will. Oh, before I forget, we have the Q&A app going on this Google Plus Hangout, which means if you go to Google Plus, there should be. I don't have a link to it myself, but there should be a way to ask questions. So if you want to ask us some questions, just fire them off there, and we'll see them here, and we'll get to them when we can get to them. A number of things to talk about. Obviously, there were 6 games this past weekend, so we've got a lot to discuss. But we'll start with a little bit of news from the league. And one thing I think Tyler may want to address is the suspension of Kyle Sorensen for one game. We did discuss this last week briefly, and it seemed that none of us who watched the game actually really understood why he got a game suspension or a game misconduct in the first place. So the fact that the league not only held that up but added to it by adding a suspension to it is a little puzzling. Tyler, what do you think?
Yeah, I went back and watched it. It was a situation where I saw the forward come through the middle, defender came together, both of them had their hands up here, and Kyle's stick came up, got Drew Westerveld in the face, basically. Westerveld hit the ground, and I went back and checked the score sheet, and they had Kyle called for spearing, which is very rarely called in the league. So it was interesting. Usually spearing is taking the butt end of your stick and jabbing somebody, and Kyle had his hands together and brought him through and got a spearing call on it. It was most unexpected. And just as general practice, guys are going to appeal their suspensions. So he appealed last week, and I don't remember if he lost. He couldn't have lost already because he played last weekend. So they'll give the final announcement. But he was there playing during the Steltham Opener this weekend in Langley. But they don't overturn these very often, so I expect there will be a suspension. He'll miss probably the Friday night game against Colorado if that plays out that way.
Yeah, I imagine you're not able to choose which game you sit out for.
Yeah,
other than the fact that you can appeal, but that's about it.
Yeah, you can't really pick one in a couple of weeks and be like, hey, kind of got a good team coming up, and I'll take that one. A little too generous with the plan then.
Yeah. The big news, I don't know if it was big news, but I thought it was interesting, that I just noticed this morning, it actually happened on Saturday, was that Jamie Lincoln was released by the Mammoth on Saturday. This was a little surprising to me. He was one of the Rookie of the Year candidates, as far as I knew, in 2012 with almost 50 points, played every game. The next year, 2013, basically halved his production with only 25 points. But then again, the team went from 11-5 down to 7-9, so the team certainly had a worse year. He had 3 points, I guess, in a couple of games this year, and I didn't hear any negative comments about him. But then we found out on Saturday that he had been released. Now, you said you talked to somebody about this one.
Yeah, I was sitting Saturday after the game, and I was talking with Doug Locker, the Stealth GM, and he just goes, Jamie Lincoln got cut today, like 1 p.m. That just came across the wire, and I was like, what? He's like, yeah, he was surprised. He learned that Lincoln didn't even travel to Alberta with the rush to either the Calgary or Edmonton games, and we were amazed. I think he probably wanted to put a call in because Lincoln falls in the category of left-handed forwards, which are rare, but he couldn't identify a clear spot on the roster that you could give to Lincoln from the current Stealth team, so I don't know, but the Stealth don't really have a problem right now. Minnesota, who's 0-2 and scored 6 goals and 5 goals in their games, they might be making a call to Lincoln. He's a young guy, fits in with their plan of bringing in young guys. But it's very, very odd to me to have a guy get cut 2-3 games into the season almost out of nowhere. I wonder if it was a shock to the team themselves, because they played Friday night a close game in Calgary. Then the guy gets cut from the roster, and 5 hours later, the team goes out and lays an egg and gets destroyed by Edmonton. I don't know if the team was frustrated by the roster move and didn't play, or if Edmonton just completely had their number that night. But it was very weird to see such a poor performance from the team on the same day that some guy gets cut unknowingly.
Melissa is a Mammoth season ticket holder, and so she's been paying close attention to the Mammoth, obviously. And despite the fact that she couldn't be here with us tonight, she did leave us some notes, and so I'll read off a little bit of what she left. I guess the cutting of Jamie Lincoln surprised her. She said Lincoln has had an impact and become a bit of a fan favorite. He seemed like a laid-back guy, but maybe his work ethic wasn't where management wants it to be, or his personality caused issues, or I don't know. The Mammoth have let go a lot of talented guys who were producing okay, but not well enough, I guess, and often it has come back to bite them. I wouldn't be surprised to see another team pick him up, and like many others who the Mammoth let go, he may thrive on a new team and score plenty of goals against his former team. And that would not be unusual. I've seen that, not so much with The Rock, honestly, but I tend to see that with the Toronto Blue Jays an awful lot. People that aren't performing so well with the Jays, they trade him off for nothing, or just let him go, and then 5 years later they're having MVP type seasons. So yeah, that wouldn't be surprising if Lincoln came back to haunt the Mammoth, particularly if he's picked up by a Western Division team. Though, like you said, I'm not sure who exactly in the West would be looking for help offensively. The other bit of news, also with the Mammoth, was that John Gallant was moved to the inactive roster. Now, this was just on the Mammoth webpage, and the inactive roster it's not exactly clear what that is. If that's just injured people, or I mean, obviously Casey Powell's on it, so he's not injured. He's on the holdout list, I think, right now. But Melissa thinks that Gallant tore his hamstring. So no idea how long he'll be out.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything there. There's, like you said, there's a lot of ways the guys get off the active list. And if they put him on the official injured reserve list, then they would be looking at a minimum number of weeks he has to sit out. I think 3 or 4 in the NL is the minimum if you go to the official injured reserve list.
Okay, so we may not see Gallant for a little while, but like I said, we're not sure exactly which list he was put onto, so he may just be out for a short while. He hasn't played yet this year, so I don't know if in baseball you can put somebody on the disabled list retroactive to when they got injured. I don't know if that's a possibility here.
I think it is. I think I've seen that as an option, but if the guy's missed 2 weeks, well, now 3 weeks, and then they put him on the list, and you make it retroactive, and then he's already done his time, they could have used his roster spot a while ago.
Yeah, that would be a puzzling move if he's not sufficiently injured that he may be out for a number of weeks, starting now even. That's about all the news we have this week, but there's a bunch of games. Let's get to those. Normally we just take them in order, but seeing as we had the very first game or first regular season game, let's correct that, in Vancouver in almost 10 years, we'll start with the home opener from the Vancouver Stealth. And Tyler, you were there, so you can lead us on that.
Sure. I made the trek up to Langley for Saturday night and got to experience the new game environment. It was pretty nice. We felt a difference in the crowd energy compared to Everett, and some people there were chalking it up to this an American versus Canadian thing, where the Americans go there and get crazy and cheer like wild at the games, and Canadians kind of sit back and enjoy the game and have a social aspect, spending time with the person next to them. Which, I don't know, like if you watch the American versus Canadian teams in the NLL, I've been to Calgary a few times, and they're wild. They're totally into the game, cheering as if there's an American team like you watch in Buffalo or uh, Colorado. So I don't have like definitive proof one way or the other, but there was some crowd energy going. The game day experience was pretty smooth. There wasn't like delays opening the gates. There wasn't like problems with introductions, and everything just was nice. Actually, the only game day thing I think was a little screwy was they tried to have the referee Todd LeBranch mic'd up to announce the penalties over the PA system. And the very first call of the game, he went over, hit his little switch, and it wasn't crystal clear what he was saying, and it wasn't smooth, and he never went to it again. I don't know if he just forgot after that point because it's not part of his usual routine, or if he just didn't have a perfect experience and quit on it. And I didn't get an answer on that. But they were trying to educate the crowd there about like what was going on, what the calls were. The PA guy in the second half was calling out the saves like they used to do in Everett, or you'll hear Buffalo after a save or a shot, and they call out who we say T-Rich, or they say Vino in Rochester, and Cosmo, Tavares, Steinhaus, they all have these crazy calls from the PA guys, and the first half they had none of that, so it was really kind of a dead crowd energy. And in the second half they picked it up, and they started making more of those calls. They'll get used to it. It was a different staff. All the previous stealth games in Langley had been with the Washington game staff, so they knew kind of their role and how to do stuff. And it was their first game on their own, as it were, in Langley. And they did all right. They could do a little better, but for an opening night, it was a good experience.
Well, I obviously wasn't there, but I did see the I did see the game on TV, and or not on TV, but on YouTube. And I have to say the video feed from the Langley Event Center is just outstanding. I was watching the Rochester Philly game for a short while. I only saw a few minutes of it, and then switched over to the Vancouver game, and there was just no way I was going back. So that's another thing that Langley certainly has going for it. The quality of the feed was really good the whole time. The audio was good. I never had any audio dropping out or anything like that. So that was excellent. As for the game itself, I suppose you were pretty happy with the outcome. Tyler Richards was unbelievable. I thought Mike Grimes also had a really good game. I think he was actually one of the MVPs as well. And Reese Dutch was Reese Dutch. I mean, he was excellent as well. He's pretty consistent that way, I think.
Yeah, he was the stealth-only multi-goal scorer. It was really spread around effort. You only have 8 goals. You don't have a lot of chance for anybody to kind of take command. But it was one of the best games I've ever seen Tyler Richards play, and got a lot of opportunity to watch the kid play. He kind of took the summer off, and I would say, kind of got this eye of the tiger thing going on. It's like, I'm not going to get beat by Vince anymore. I'm not going to be second best to anybody. I'm coming in ready to be the best goalie in the league. Just stand back and watch. He's pretty excited. Defensively, the Stealth were fine. I mean, they held into 8 goals. They gave up 50 shots, but I don't know if they so much gave up 50 shots or allowed Minnesota to take those 50 shots. They were not all quality attempts. 45 saves for Tyler Richards, 90% save is one of the largest numbers percentage-wise I've ever seen. The offense for the Stealth, they got 8 goals. The way I was able to summarize it is that the Stealth took every opportunity that was given to them by the Swarm and capitalized, but they didn't create necessarily. Maybe 1-2 goals were kind of set up in an opportunity. Like the very, very first goal was Reese brought it down, brought it to the right side, took a couple steps down, got a quick pass back, and ripped a shot side to side. And it was set play, first goal of the new franchise, as it were. That looked pretty much set up, and the Stealth did that. But the other 7 goals, they were all in transition or guys cutting through and getting a pass on the wrong side and still putting it away. It was not enough to say that they're the greatest offense we've ever had, but I'm glad that they won. The point when they get to that they could dictate what they're going to do, then I'll be very comfortable that they'll be the best team in the West, but I'm not sure that they are based on what I saw. Minnesota's defense was very much like Edmonton's. They pushed out to midfield the whole time. Stealth never had a chance to just stand there and hold the ball and get set up. If you had the ball, you had pressure on you at any point on the floor. It was a pretty incredible to kind of see, all right, and they weathered it. A couple of years ago, Stealth would have a lot of trouble in that same situation, but you play the rush enough, you get used to it, and they handled it better.
The one thing I mentioned in my IL Indoor column that came out this morning was Cody Bremner's game-winning goal was pretty awesome. A nice passing play back and forth across a couple times over to Bremner, who was covered pretty well. Looked like he was going to fire it, and about halfway through he just stopped. And I'm trying to remember who the defender was, and I wrote it down, and I can't remember who it was now. Harnett, possibly?
Nah, that'd be the wrong team. But yeah, huge pump fake.
It just faked it and just ducked right on Downing, I think it was. That's who it was. Anyway,
yeah.
Huge fake, just stopped dead, ducked underneath and went around him, and then shot it. And yeah, that was a really nice goal.
Yeah, Stealth had some great looks. Grimes is like one-timer. Mike Grimes grew up in Peterborough playing hockey, and in hockey, I guess he's more of a forward and a shooter in defense. In NLL, he plays defense, so he's got his hands, and you watch him shoot. It's just always this little slap shot type motion, like he's got a hockey stick. And so his shot was just a one-timer. He got a feed, like it was pretty tight feed, and he didn't catch it so much as he was just redirecting the whole time through his shot. It was beautiful.
Nice. Okay, let's move on, and I guess we've got the debut game out of the way. Let's go back to Friday's games, and we'll start in Buffalo with the Bandits' come from behind victory over the Rock. And I actually drove down to Buffalo with my sons for this one. And as I mentioned in my game report, this was I'm glad I went down for this one as an NLL fan because it was an entertaining game. As a Rock fan, I probably should have left at halftime. But the Rock played really well in the first half. Bandits didn't. They weren't terrible, but they just didn't seem to have it together. The Rock was passing all over the place in the offensive zone, and the Bandits just couldn't handle it. Cosmo played pretty well in the first half, but it was pretty much all Rock in the first half, and the three of us had all predicted a Rock victory, so things were kind of going as expected. And then Troy Cordingley must have given the halftime speech of the ages because a different team came out after halftime. The Rock didn't play nearly as well in the second half as they did in the first, but they weren't terrible either. But the Bandits were outstanding. Their third quarter was excellent. The Rock got nothing in the third. They didn't score at all. The Bandits scored 4. They had all the momentum. Anthony Cosmo's game really, really improved. Between that and the game in Philadelphia, he's looking a lot more like the guy that I think they were hoping they got from Minnesota a couple of years ago. In his first 2 seasons, he showed glimpses of that, but for the most part, he hasn't been what they were expecting. But on Friday night, he certainly looked like that in the second half, especially. So the third quarter they played excellent. The fourth quarter they played really well as well. The Bandits, that is. They just outworked the Rock in the second half. The Rock didn't seem to adjust to the changes that the Bandits made, and they won the game and they deserved it. Did you see any of that one?
Yeah, I had it on the background while we were having like dinner and stuff, and I saw one play where it was just like in the summer with the Chiefs where Roy Smith totally stepped in front of his shot and stopped it just because that's what was needed at that moment. And Buffalo surprised me. I wasn't sure if it was just Cosmo the defense, and it appears that the problem was the defense. Cosmo is better when he's playing in a system with the defensive help. He's not going to make all the saves by himself. And so the defense got their act together, came out in second half of that game for the first time really this season, and allowed Cosmo to make the saves that he's expected to make and not have to make every save in the game that he shouldn't have to. And they turned it around and got the W.
Yeah, I was really impressed with the Bandits in the second half of that game. They certainly did not look like the last place team that they were a year ago, and they've made a few roster changes here and there. Obviously, Benesh is a big one, and he looked pretty good. It didn't look to me like they were funneling everything through Benesh, which is kind of what I was thinking they were going to do. That he would be the quarterback and he would be running everything, and everybody else would be sort of looking to him to lead offensively. And that's not really what I saw at all. He's certainly a big part of their offense. And if Tavares plays like the way he played on Friday and Sunday, he could have another 5 years of his career. But between the two of them and Dane Smith and like the whole offense seemed to be much more of a team thing than a get the ball to Benesh, which I think is probably going to end up being a really good thing for the Bandits.
Definitely, I agree there. Speaking of Benesh, that reminds me of the thought I had of the Swarm coming out of the game on Saturday was the first game they scored 6 goals, second game they scored 5, and the difference between the 2 years is Benesh isn't there. He was apparently the total catalyst for their offense the last couple of years, and they need to find a new plan. I thought Callum Crawford would probably be the quarterback. He's a little more experienced. He's had some years with the big assist numbers and big points, so he could be setting stuff up. And maybe teams know that he's the only guy they have to do that, and they're focusing on him, but they don't have anything going along those lines for the Swarm offense. And I think Ryan Benesh is sorely missed, and they'll work it out eventually.
Next game was Colorado and Calgary. And Calgary won this one 13-11. I didn't see this game. This was at the same time as the Rock game, so I didn't see any of this. I did watch a couple of highlights on YouTube on Sunday, but not much. But it sounds like Colorado was in this game a lot more than they were in the game on Saturday.
Yeah, I had it on, and it's a little more back and forth type action. Colorado was never fully out of it, and it was a game. It definitely was the exact opposite of what came up the following night. And Colorado plays really well in Calgary. They won there last year. I think won there in the playoffs even a couple of years ago when they weren't a great team. But they know how to go into Calgary and play, and it's the one spot that they don't really mind having a road game, I guess. They came up short this time to start the season.
Melissa's mentioned a number of times that the Mammoth have had this tendency over the last couple of years to just take a quarter off, and I guess this time they didn't score in the third at all. I sort of looked at the stats. They did score 5 in the second, but they allowed 7. So it's like their offense was going, but their defense stopped. And then in the next quarter, they only allowed 2, but they didn't score at all. So if they can get both their offense and their defense working at the same time, they'll be a lot better off. But as long as they keep taking quarters off here and there, they're not going to win games.
Yeah, they need to play 60 minutes, and it's kind of a cliche, but like you take that time off and you're going to be toasted. Got to play 60.
Melissa left us a few notes. She said the Mammoth were flat in the third, so the shots were off. There were missed opportunities, bad passes, not staying aware. I guess there was a goal from Dane Doby where he, what does it say? The defensive guy assumed that Ward had the ball, and I guess he didn't, and Doby just picked it up and had an easy one-on-one, and there you are.
They switched goalies again. They had Belanger start and changed to Ward. The announcer said they saw Ward was circled on the stat sheet as the starter, but when game time came, it was Belanger was in net.
Did Belanger start the Saturday game as well?
I do not know.
Okay.
Actually, I know. Actually, they both played about 30 minutes. I saw something. I looked at the stat sheet because I couldn't believe how much the game was wild, like in Edmonton's favor, and they played like 28 and 32 minutes, something like that. They both played just about a half. I don't know who started.
It seems odd that considering Belanger started both the first and second games and was pulled in both of them, that they started him again in the third. Now, for both their first and second games, Dylan Ward played a lot better than Belanger did, so it was kind of surprising that they didn't give him the start in their third game. And of course, the same thing happened again. Belanger started, didn't play as well. They pulled him, put in Ward, and he played better. Now, I guess we may as well move to the Saturday game against the Rush, in which they got completely demolished, 17-6. It almost seemed. I'm guessing both goalies struggled mightily in that one. I didn't see an awful lot of that game because I was watching the Vancouver game at the same time. But every time I switched to it, I think Edmonton scored. So I sort of figured, okay, well, this one's kind of over anyway. So I didn't see the goaltending situation there.
Yeah, I just know the by the numbers of how many minutes the game was. It was over early. I mean, first goal of the second quarter was the game-winning goal. So, minute 49 into the second quarter was technically the game-winning goal. That's bad news for any team. It looks like Belanger started. No, it doesn't matter because they had Brody McDonald first. It's just by number. So Belanger is before Ward. They gave the loss to Belanger, so he must have started to be in there when that seventh goal was scored and still play 34 minutes. Yeah, it was 6-0, and then Westervelt scored with 30 seconds left in the first quarter. And then 3 more Rush goals and 1 Mammoth goal at 2.5 minutes left in the second quarter. In the second quarter, sorry, Westervelt was 30 seconds left in the first quarter. So it was rush, Mammoth. Rush, Mammoth. They were just getting worked.
Melissa left us some notes with this one, and she was obviously less than pleased with this one. Her first word was pathetic. The Rush were a good, strong team, but that was horrible to watch, completely one-sided. Mammoth had too many penalties, no fire, just completely flat play from both the offense and the defense. Goalies seemed asleep. Seemed like every shot the Rush took resulted in a goal. That definitely looked like that to me as well. In the first quarter, they had 4 goals on about 6 or 7 shots in 5 minutes. Then she also added, have to wonder if there are bigger changes coming down the pipes. Some fans are already grumbling about Hamley and or Govett being the issue. Some are focusing on John Grant, some on all three. Certainly a breakdown somewhere. The team has talent, but maybe too many individuals rather than team focus. And they've been struggling since the team was overhauled in 2008. And that seemed unfair since the team played well in 2007. I was wondering the same thing if they've tried. Now, I mean, it's obviously too early to say we've still got goaltending problems. Maybe Belanger is not the answer. Maybe Dylan Ward is. But we're only 4 games in. So it's probably too early to say this group is a failure. But you got to wonder if they keep making wholesale changes like this. I mean, how long is Steve Govett gonna survive these kind of changes if they're not actually resulting in success?
I think Govett's immune to the problem. He's been given control of the team by an ownership group that is focused on the arena and the NBA, NHL teams that reside there, and they're not going to put the effort into micromanaging the NLL team, even though they bring in a lot of tickets to the now 9 home games. So who would you replace them with is the question, and I don't think they want to bother to find out. So they're just going to let Govett work and keep selling seats, and then he probably doesn't appear to be the problem unless they're really looking and focusing on stuff, and maybe they're talking to players outside of his control, and they'll get a different opinion. But he's been there long enough, and I don't see it's him. Hamley, it's the same question. Who would you get to replace Hamley as the coach? There's not a lot of great NLL quality coaches out there, and so you start going through the players, and they've tried first changes now with Lincoln getting released. Team did not respond well to that, and they have 2 more games next weekend. They'll have a third of their schedule done in the first 4 weeks of the season, which is kind of incredible.
It does seem weird. The Mammoth I think they play twice next week, so yeah, they'll be up to 6 games. The Rocks played 2, the Bandits have played 3, so yeah, they're going to be way ahead of everybody else, and then they'll have who knows how many bye weeks. And if you look at their schedule, I don't have their schedule in front of me, but I imagine if they're playing that many games this early, they're going to have bye weeks all over the place in February and March.
Yeah, so they'll have time to work their stuff out, but how big of a hole are they going to be in before they get themselves settled? That's a bad spot to be in.
Okay, where are we now? This one shouldn't be long because I don't think any of us actually saw this. You saw the most of it. The Rochester 13-9 win over the Philadelphia Wings on Saturday. I saw a few minutes of this game, but not much more than that. Melissa said she didn't get to watch any of it at all. What do we have? I'm just looking at the stats here. Looked like a fairly back and forth game until the second, and then Rochester scored 8 in a row, and that pretty much put it away.
Rochester or Buffalo?
No, I'm talking Rochester, Philly.
Rochester, Philly. Sorry.
Saturday.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I was looking at the wrong. Might scroll down too far. So that game was 3-3 at the end of the first, and so all right, end of the first quarter, took a pause, drove to the Langley Arena, Langley Event Center, parked the car, went into the Stealth. They have a field house, which is like the Toronto Rock Athletic Center, their practice facility. They had the game up on the screen, and it was 9-3. It was like 10 minutes, and they had 6 goals, and they didn't entirely put it away, but it pretty much was done at that point. I was surprised that Philly was able to battle back.
Well, yeah, I mean, the game-winning goal was 4 minutes into the third quarter, and that put it up to 10-3. And then Philly scored the next 5 goals. The next 6 goals.
Yeah, they got back within 1.
Got back within 1, just couldn't get that 1 extra. And then the Nighthawks scored 3 more after that to put it away. But when the Nighthawks scored their 11th goal, they had gone 18 straight minutes without scoring. So it certainly looked like Philadelphia was ready to come back and actually take that game. And it's odd how often that can happen in this league. I mean, you're not going to see that kind of thing in hockey. Now and again, you see it in baseball. Some team's down by 7 or 8 and comes back and wins it. But I've seen it a number of times in lacrosse that either some team will come back from being down by 7 or 8 and win, or at least make a game of it, and it looks like Philadelphia certainly did by the fourth quarter.
Yeah, Philadelphia is showing their moments of brilliance, but they're not quite having the 60 minutes. Kind of the same problem that Colorado has.
So I guess we don't have an awful lot to say about that one, considering that's all that we've seen. There was another game. Where did it go? Oh, the Sunday game. This was the one you were talking about, Buffalo and Philly. And I saw most of the first half and the last half of the fourth quarter in overtime in this one. And this was an entertaining game as well, in that the first half was also back and forth. The Bandits had a lead, and then Philly had a lead, and then the Bandits tied, and then Philly took the lead, and then the Bandits tied, and then they went again ahead. And this is all by like halfway through the second quarter. Each team has had 4 leads or 3 leads or something crazy. And then this is probably the third or fourth game this weekend where somebody scored 6 in a row. So the Bandits scored 6 in a row. Looked like they were putting it away. They were up 9-4, and they were up 10-5 a few minutes later. And then Philadelphia scored 4 to get back within 1. And then John Tavares scored his fourth of the night to give the Bandits a 2-goal lead. And then Philadelphia came back and they did tie this one, and tied it with about 5 minutes left. And it looked like they were going to do the same thing as they almost did on in the Friday game or in the Saturday game. And this time they actually did get back to tie it. And then, of course, John Tavares scored his second game-winning goal in 3 days. Just, a minute into overtime.
Yeah, the tied fourth quarter lacrosse games are just some of the best stuff in sports, I think. When you think about it, they don't really have timeouts. You get the 5-minute and the 10-minute TV timeouts. Most times they just play straight through. If after that final whistle blows, after the final TV timeout, you go 4 minutes with maybe a 10 seconds of break time, and it's just tense. Goalies, I can't believe the pressure that they're really under, and that I got to make the save. I mean, this guy gets one goal and the game will be over at any point. Very exciting stuff, and probably a great home game for the Philly fans to experience, even if it was a loss.
Yeah, it sounded pretty quiet about halfway through the game when it looked like, I mean, it never looked like it was over. This was lacrosse, we all know that. But Philly wasn't playing really well, and of course the Bandits were, and they were up by a bunch, and so the crowd tended to get quiet. And then after a while, they realized, their team was starting to play a lot better. And once the score started to get closer, they realized, hey, we have a chance here, and they got pretty darn loud. And let me tell you, the Philly crowd, even there was less than 10,000 there. I think it was 8 or 9,000 or something, which I think is kind of typical for Philly these days. They used to be up in the 15,000 range, like Colorado for a while, but having a crappy team for a decade will kind of kill that. But they were pretty darn loud with when the game got tied, and then Tavares silenced them pretty darn quickly into overtime.
It was like 50 seconds in or something. It was a really quick goal.
Yep. Okay, so those were the games this weekend. Some pretty exciting stuff happening. We had a blowout. We had an overtime win. We had all kinds of things. So let's take a look at the predictions we made last week. And I don't have the actual predictions around, but I do have the numbers, and of course I wanted to get to this because I was 5-1.
Yes, you had a good week.
The only one I didn't get was the one I really wanted to get, and that was the Toronto-Buffalo game. I picked Toronto. They obviously lost. I did want to look at something. Let me just bring that up for a second. All three of us picked Toronto, and they lost. That was the third time in the first 6 games that's happened, that all three of us picked something and we all got it wrong. But then we did okay after that, because then we all picked Calgary, who won, and we all picked Vancouver, who won. So we did okay there. So I went 5-1, you went 4-2, and Melissa went 2-4. And Melissa's not having much luck with her predictions these days. So overall, after the first 3 weeks, I'm 7-4. You're 6-5, and poor Melissa is 3-8.
Yep, it's not an easy game picking these things. But we're gonna keep doing it though. We don't quit.
Absolutely. I made picks for every game last year and every game the year before, and I was under 500 both times. Not far under, just a couple of games under 500. But then when I think of it, that just means that if I was to flip a coin at every game, the coin would do better than I would on average. So we'll go over our picks for this week, and Melissa made hers before she left. Unfortunately, she only had 6 games listed, and so we don't have a pick for her for the 7th game. So we'll go through those. Melissa picked. So the games are Calgary plays in Edmonton, and Melissa went for the Rush on that one. Colorado plays in Vancouver, and she picked Vancouver. In fact, it looks like, I was going to say it looks like she went with all home teams this week, but it's not quite true. Minnesota plays in Philly, and she picked Philly. Toronto's in Rochester, and she went with the Nighthawks there. And then she broke with tradition, and Vancouver plays in Calgary, and she picked Stealth, and Buffalo in Colorado, and it would probably hurt her to type this, but she was picking the Bandits for that one. So the other game is Philly playing in Minnesota on Sunday, and we don't have a pick for her for that, so we will try to get her to pick one. Mine were actually fairly similar. Oh my goodness, mine are exactly the same as hers. So I went with the Rush against Calgary. The Rush just looked too good last week. Obviously not going to beat everybody with by 11 goals, but they look pretty darn good. Vancouver and Colorado, I had to go for the Stealth with that one. Minnesota and Philadelphia. Until Minnesota proves otherwise, they look like a team that could really use some offensive help. And now I guess if anybody knows how to beat Evan Kirk, it might be his former team. But I'm going to go with Philadelphia on that one. Toronto and Rochester, and this one hurt me to type as well. I can see Toronto winning this game for sure, but I still find it hard to bet against Matt Vince, so I got to go with the Rochester Nighthawks in that one. Vancouver, Calgary, I went with Vancouver. And Buffalo, Colorado. Buffalo looked really good last week, and Colorado did not, so I'm going to have to go with Bandits there. And Philly and Minnesota, just to spice things up, I went with Minnesota on that one. I think they can beat Philly if they get their offensive stuff together, and playing in front of their home crowd may help that as well. So Tyler, you can go through yours.
Sure. A lot of the same picks as you and Melissa. I've got Edmonton beating Calgary until somebody can shut them down. Edmonton looks top-notch, though their 2 games are against the Mammoth so far, which may or may not be proving anything. The Colorado at Vancouver, if Saturday's game is an indicator that Colorado is currently imploding for some reason, then there's no way I can pick them, and I'll stick with the Stealth. That Minnesota at Philly, you touched on the exact point I was going to go for, that if you're going to beat Evan Kirk, might as well be the team that has had him for the past couple of years. So I'll see Minnesota take that chance and get a win in Philly. Toronto at Rochester, I've seen no flaws in Rochester's game yet, so they're going to hold on. When they do get beat, it'll pretty much be a surprise no matter what. They're top team in the league right now. Vancouver at Calgary. This one, both teams play Friday night. Both teams have to travel to Calgary on Saturday, though being in Edmonton, I think Calgary might just drive down afterwards and just wake up in Calgary and after spending a little extra time up. And that might be a slight advantage, but I can see the Stealth going in there and getting a victory, but it'll be a great battle. Buffalo at Colorado. Still Colorado. Still don't know what's going on with them, so I can't pick them safely. And I got Buffalo winning that game. And then Sunday, to cap off the true home and home, which you don't see very much, you have Philly and Minnesota going to Minnesota after playing the night before. And I'm going to pick Philly to win in Minnesota after losing the previous game. And we'll see if they can learn from their mistakes and turn it around quickly and can't get a W that they may have wanted the night before at home.
All right, so it looks like we're all going to sink or swim pretty close to equally this coming weekend, since we all have fairly similar picks anyway. That's pretty much it for what we had on the list. Anything else that you thought of that you wanted to mention?
Not this time. It's nice to get my first road trip into the year. Saw some familiar faces, but I know that I'm not going to miss doing that every weekend. Like Friday night, another game, I'm not going to be there, and that'll be a change for me. The first home game I'm missing for the Stealth in a long, long time. I think since we moved to Everett, I know the last 2 seasons in San Jose I was flying down, so I went to a couple, and but I'm really happy that I'll get to have the feed out of Langley, which is pristine, and Jake Elliott making the call. So it'll be easier to miss some of those home games when I get to watch the best feed in the league.
Definitely. Yeah, I don't think I'll be able to make any of the games this weekend either. I may possibly get to Rochester for the Toronto game. Um, but while Buffalo's about an hour drive from me, Rochester is closer to 4. Um, so it's much bigger deal. And I know you're saying, yeah, Crimea River, I used to do that for every game. So we'll see if that works out. So I guess that's our show for this week. Once we're finished here, the show will be available on YouTube. And if you head to addictedtolacrosse.com, then all of our shows are going to be or linked to there. If you have any questions for us or any feedback of any kind, you can send us email at feedback@addictedtolacrosse.com. Or you can get in touch with us at Twitter. We have a Twitter account now, which is LAX Podcast. You can contact any of the three of us at our own Twitter account. Mine is on the screen there, Graeme Parrow. Tyler's was also on the screen, Stealth Dragon. And Melissa is Snow Kitten. And yeah, I guess that's it. Hopefully the three of us will be together next week, and we will see you next Monday.
All right. Cheers, man.
Good night.